Welcome back to the Sunday Serving Channel, where you come for words of hope and truth and inspiration from the gospel. And I'm sorry, it's just Remy and Delta and myself today. Delta's already off after squirrels. Unfortunately, my young friend, the young Bible scholar, Timothy's not with us today, but he'll come back some other time. But that's bad news and good news for you. I guess the bad news is he can't share some of his interesting insights from the Greek. But the good news is that I can't cut him off mid-sentence, so it's a win-win situation. Today, let's go to the heart of the gospel and just let a story in there from Jesus, from the Gospel of John, speak to us about what is true. How does Jesus show us to treat each other, to lead? And I know this might be a little off season. I tend to read the story around Passover and Easter, but I think it's important for us to take this in today. So John 13, chapter 13, this is at the last gathering when Jesus was with his disciples before he was betrayed, captured, crucified, and died for us, for you, for me. It says, "Now before the feast of Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of the world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." So a couple times before that, Jesus has said his hour had not come. Now it says he said to his disciples his hour had come. The fulfillment of why he was here on earth, why God had sent him, his son, to earth. It was now. And so if you imagine, Jesus must have really had on his heart to get to the most important thing, to give the most important message. And Jesus loved everybody, he loved the whole world. But it says here, having loved his own. So that didn't stop him from loving everybody, but these disciples that had been with him, that had dropped their nets and followed him, they were his own people who really believed. And even in that circle, there was one who was going to betray him. But Jesus says he loved his own who were in the world, and he loved them to the end. So that's a very special love, to love to the end. What does that mean? To the end of his life? Or does it mean endless love, right? Love that never grows old, never ends, will continue on for always. During supper, when the devil had already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. So Jesus knew that one of his own, Judas, was going to betray him. But it's interesting here that it says Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, all things into Jesus' hands, that he had come from God and was going back to God, he rose. So they're celebrating. Whatever follows here must be truly significant and important. He rose from supper. They were sitting there, reclining, celebrating this most important celebration. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel that was wrapped around him. Wow. That's vivid, right? Every step of that, every picture must have been burned in John's memory and consciousness. He was part of this. He had experienced this. This is an incredibly vivid description that John must have written years later. And what a shocking thing for Jesus to do. Act, parable, this important message he had was an action. And I guess in those days they all wore sandals. I'm not sure if they were Birkenstocks. I think they had wore straps and stuff, but The roads they walked on were dusty and dirty. Also, they were probably open sewers. It wasn't very clean. And so when guests came into a house, it was traditional for the lowest, for the most humble, maybe for the most junior, maybe for the most despised servant, to wash the feet of the guests so that they would be clean when it came in to have a party, have a dinner. But here Jesus is doing that. I guess the disciples, maybe, in Luke it says they all came into that gathering arguing who was greatest. Hey, I'm the best. No, this is my background, or my daddy did this, or whatever, right? They were arguing, and Jesus confronted them, said, none of you are great. You have to be like a child to be great, to enter the kingdom. But here, Jesus is showing. He's doing this most menial, lowly deed. He himself. And he didn't call a servant in to wash their feet and said, you should be like that servant. He showed them. He took on this incredible, humble job and started washing the feet of all these disciples. It goes on. He came to Simon Peter. So he must not have started with Simon. Maybe he started with John. Maybe he started with Judas. And they probably were all speechless, like, what's going on here? Maybe some of them sensed this is a special, holy moment, and we're just quiet. But he comes to Peter, Simon Peter, who said, Lord, do you wash my feet? Jesus answered him, what I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, if I do not wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, the one who is bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him. That's why he said, not every one of you. Let's think about that interaction. So Simon Peter, he's the one to react, right? No. I'm not going to have this. Jesus, you're not going to wash my feet. Not you. And then, so he goes from saying, no, I'm not going to take this, to Jesus saying, well, if I don't wash you, you can't be part of me. And then he switches 180 degrees. Oh, man, don't just wash my feet then, wash my hands, wash my head, wash everything. So a little impulsive there maybe, right? You go from saying you're not going to wash me to saying, basically he's saying, Jesus, you're doing too much, to saying, wait, Jesus, you're not doing enough. But let's reflect on that a bit, because I think it teaches us how we often are. And I don't mean this to degrade at all. Simon Peter was one of the chief disciples who really got Jesus. He was the one that walked on water, right, until he started sinking. That was kind of like washing his feet. But there's that reaction there that, it's sometimes we pretend to be humble, and actually we're proud. I think that's what's going on here. Some false humility. Instead of accepting, we have to accept that Jesus needs to wash our feet, that we can only be saved by Jesus. We have to accept love and care from each other. And what Jesus is showing here is that anyone who wants to be there for others, to lead others to Christ, needs to have that willingness to do the least thing, to wash the feet of your friends, to do the least. And then if someone does that to us, we have to have the humility to accept it, just like Peter needed to learn to accept the fact that Jesus was going to wash his feet. I think it also reflects to things like baptism, right? Everybody who follows Christ and is baptized into his death, into his resurrection, is made clean from sin, forgiven. But along the way, our feet get dusty. We backslide, we forget, we sin. And then we need our feet washed. And that's what Jesus is teaching us. And this was what was on his heart for that last gathering. How do you lead? Jesus leads in love that is completely sacrificial. He's willing to die for us. He's willing to do the lowliest task, to wash our feet, and says that, well, let's go on here, because this is the important part. Then he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who is sent. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. So Jesus says it plainly right there. I'm doing this to teach you a lesson. Do this to each other. Now, of course, we can get caught up and say, well, we better do some ceremonial foot washing then, right? Well, that's not the point, because the point is, to what extent are we willing to serve each other, to serve strangers, to serve our brothers and sisters, and not put ourselves above them, but do the lowliest task, to show love to the end, like Jesus did to his disciples. So that's such an important message. I think it's vital today. It's vital in our families. It's vital in our churches. Hey, it's vital in our country and in the world to reflect that nature of Jesus, to have that humble love, that true leadership is about leading in love to others, care to others, and in humility. So God bless you, and have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. Delta.